Hey everyone, my name's Darren Odom. I'm going to be going over skills-based hiring today and how it applies to career assessment as well as the future of career hiring practices. For today, I want to go over what we'll be reviewing, starting with different hiring practices from the past as well as how they developed into skills hiring practices today. I'm going to go over the history of skills-based hiring, what it's currently being used as, and what the data and information sets tell us about the efficacy of skills-based hiring today. And finally, I'll be going over the future of skills-based hiring and what it can mean for employers in the future with interviews and career assessment. Starting first with the hiring practices that have been used in the past. To begin, we have internal hiring. This is a very common practice in which companies will curate a select pool of their employees to then train them and get them ready for roles that they know in the future they'll be fit for. So think of it as an heir to a job role. Next will be the employee referrals. This is a very common practice in which current employees will reach out either through friends and family to see about getting them moved into their association, as well as different associations like different companies pulling from other companies and bringing into their own. Next will be the talent pool database, where companies have a select pool of candidates that they will monitor over a period of time to see how their talent progresses and if they would be a good fit in the future for one of their roles. Next is direct advertising. This is the typical way of hiring that people think of most of the time. This would include things like Indeed or LinkedIn, where there's a direct ad posting for a job, as well as a little part of the employee referrals where they're getting ads pushed to them from being involved with a company through their friend or family. This all slowly leads us into skills-based hiring and what it has changed for hiring practices and career development. To start, skills-based hiring started largely in the early 2000s, moving into the 2010s. It's a relatively new practice that started through the development of people being overqualified in some ways for positions. So there was a big increase in people obtaining higher education degrees, and it began to become more difficult to discern which would be a better candidate just based on their education or economic background. And so skills based hiring moved more into focusing on a person's work and life skills rather than just their education or economic background, using what they're experienced and what they have worked in the past to create a broader picture of their abilities. Through time, with skills based hiring, companies have begun to reduce job postings requiring degrees, as can be seen in the graph below. This doesn't mean that education is always ruled out. However, the focus now is pulled on the person's abilities in the workplace and their skills rather than just from where they learn them from. This has led to a larger portion of employees having either non relevant degrees or possibly no degrees in the job that they have, though there are still some restrictions in which careers do require degrees. This is shown with how popular skills-based hiring is becoming. In the graphic below, you can see different career options that have begun to increase how much they use skills-based hiring, and this applies a lot in manufacturing and skills-based trades such as vocational work, mechanics, plumbers, electricians who don't necessarily require a degree but do require a level of skills and abilities to be able to perform their duties. There are still some difficulties with implementing skills based hiring. A lot of companies and careers still require degrees because, in the nature of those careers, they need that education level. Think doctors, lawyers, something that requires an extensive amount of learning and education, not just how well they can do the task. But it has been shown that with skills hiring, they actually outperform the traditional hiring methods. So you can have someone who has had the traditional education route versus somebody who's been hired based on their skills actually sometimes perform 10 to 20% better than the person who was traditionally hired. This leads us into the future of skills-based hiring and where it's going to go. Further into the future, we want to continue adopting skills-based hiring into different employee and career sets, the ones that can be applied, such as the vocational and more manufacturing and skills careers. Think electricians again, and companies in which you don't have to have a specific level of education to perform it, cashiers, um, food workers, farmers, but still requiring some level of education, but can be improved upon based on their skills, not just the education. It can also overcome traditional hiring practices that have been so limiting to um, employees and potential employees because they may not meet specific requirements but are still able to perform that duty. This moves into integrating the skills-based hiring into larger companies, not just select companies that have moved into more modern approaches. For example, Apple and Google will use a lot of skills-based hiring for their computer science employees, because whether or not they have the required education, if they can perform the coding, then that is what they require. So there are still larger companies such as Walmart and other big box companies who still have levels of education and skills requirements that don't necessarily apply to what the job entails. And so incorporating a more skills-based hiring will allow qualified employees to use what they know how to do without having a formal education background. Finally, we can use this to start correlating data with if skills-based hiring truly is reliant upon just their skills, if there's a level of education integrated into how the skills have adapted, and whether their economic and cultural backgrounds also influence their level of skills versus what they need in previous educations and for the future career options. Thank you so much, and this is going to wrap up my presentation. Here are some references that I used today for further education. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And thank you so much.